Friends defined a generation. To audiences in the mid to late 90s, it wasn't just a show. It was a phenomenon that shaped cultural conversations. It's been 21 years since the final episode aired, 21 years since we said our final goodbyes to these characters. And yet, Friends still remains one of the most popular and beloved shows of our time. For me personally, I love Friends. A large amount of my childhood was spent watching it, from early mornings with my granddad before school, to repeatedly binge watching the entire series on DVD over the Christmas holidays. The show was inescapable when I was a child, and I feel as though it has become the blueprint for modern sitcoms. But before we look at life after Friends, let's look at the TV comedy landscape before Friends aired, and please like and subscribe. Throughout the 80s and the early 90s, the most prevalent shows seemed to revolve around the archetypal nuclear family. You had the likes of the Keatons in Family Ties, which ran from 1982 through to 1989. This starred Michael Gross as Stephen Keaton and Meredith Baxter as Elise. They were once radical liberals in the 1960s, now middle-aged, raising a number of children in Ohio during the height of the Reagan administration.
This is a sin against capitalism.
Then you had The Cosby Show that followed the Huxtables, with Father Cliff being a surgeon, and matriarch Claire, a successful lawyer in her own right, all the while raising 4 young children.
Possible. Trying to get 4 kids dressed to go out?
These shows, and countless others, had their own unique perspectives and characters that had their own struggles. But the central theme that keeps coming back is keeping that quote-unquote family ties alive. And while this idyllic familial bond was being represented through TV, that wasn't necessarily the reality. Throughout the 70s and the 80s, more and more children were coming home to empty houses, as both parents would be working full-time jobs.
That's the funny thing, I can't have a baby, because I have a 12:30 lunch meeting.
Thus, giving birth to the term latchkey kid generation. This generation was built upon self-reliance and being independent from their parents. And during this time, family dynamics had changed from the nuclear family to something else. Young adults were focusing on work just like their parents, but unlike them, they weren't settling down as quickly. They weren't getting married, nor were they having children at as young an age as before.
They are insane. The whole thing, love, marriage, children, relationships, it's all insane.
Now at the turn of the decade coming into the 1990s, shows began to reflect this. You have the likes of Frasier that seemed to play on the familial bonds from previous shows by having Frasier being a successful, career-driven man, but he had seemingly failed when it came to his love life. He was divorced and almost estranged from his ex-wife and son.
Niles, sorry to hear your marriage ended in a shambles.
Ditto.
In addition to this, his ailing father moves in with him, and his brother often visits.
It's times like this that most families pull together and draw strength from each other. What shall we do?
The show does have elements of this generation, though, with characters such as Roz, the producer on Frasier's radio show, a woman who had moved to Seattle to focus on her career. And furthermore, it's explored through the character of Daphne. She had moved from England to get work in Seattle.
I love Devonshire Clotted Green.
But the show that I find often draws most similarities to Friends is Seinfeld. Both shows are based in New York City, both have an ensemble cast of young, working professionals, and both follow the lives and everyday struggles of these characters. On paper, yes, these shows are similar, but in reality, they couldn't be further apart. While Friends keeps the warm, familial atmosphere of its comedic predecessors, Seinfeld goes for a more cynical approach.
Now, they're day olds. The homeless won't even touch them. Oh, we try to fool them by putting a few fresh ones on top, but they dig. They test.
And while the Friends crew often found themselves in outlandish situations, take for instance Ross with his leather pants and his overwhelming teeth.
What's up?
As well as Chandler, drunkenly fooling around with one of Joey's sisters and not being able to remember which one it was.
Cookie, now you can punch.
What?
These characters were able to grow from these mishaps and reflect on them, whereas with Seinfeld, Jerry and the gang would repeatedly get themselves into situations that you as a viewer know would end badly, but they carried on through with it anyway. Seinfeld was ultimately described as a show about nothing. It focused on the absurdity of everyday life and showed how people don't change, despite their flaws being plain to see, time and time again. You can see the show's influence still firmly entrenched in sitcoms today with the likes of Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
There's nowhere for me to run. What am I gonna do, say no?
As mentioned, Seinfeld is a show about nothing, and in stark contrast to this, Friends is described by co-creator Marta Kaufman as
that time in your life after college when your friends are your family.
This is what I think differentiates Friends from other shows. From the shows that came before it and the time in which it was released, Friends acts as a bridge between the shows that preceded it and those that came after. Without this clash of cultural styles, you wouldn't get what makes Friends truly so special.
Ross, I'll give you $50 for your underpants. Hey.
You wouldn't get the hilarious scenarios that these characters end up in, mixed with real, warm moments. Throughout the 10 seasons, you see these characters grow, with help from one another, and these scenarios are made possible by their own familial dynamics. All 6 of the major characters have issues with their parents, forcing them to rely on the rest of the gang for reassurance. For instance, Phoebe grew up never knowing her father, and her mother unalives herself when Phoebe was a child.
Ross, how many parents have you lost?
None.
Okay, then you don't know what it feels like when one of them comes back, do you?
A major element of her character throughout the show is wanting to know what happened to her estranged family.
Oh my God, where did you get this?
Macy's, 3rd floor, home furnishings.
This is my father. This is a picture of my dad.
In the episode, the one with Phoebe's dad, she finds out that her father has a new family and lives nearby. When learning this, she feels compelled to go and see him, but can't go alone. She initially goes with Joey and Chandler before later returning with Joey and Rachel.
See, didn't I tell you these pills would be a good idea?
She needs that support from her chosen family to face the blood relatives that rejected her so many years ago. Flash forwarding to the one with Joey's bag, Phoebe finally meets her dad at her grandmother's funeral, and after the funeral, the two share a brief moment together, where Phoebe reveals that she is his daughter, and that her mother died 17 years prior. The look that Bob Balaban, who plays Frank, gives when he finds this out is heartbreaking. You feel the emotion flood through him in this brief moment. And while this moment was lovely, and gave a new dimension to Phoebe's character, the writers decided not to continue with it, and her father was never seen again, which I think was the right decision. It would have put Phoebe's character into a state of flux, as you wouldn't be able to have her dad become a reoccurring character without some real introspection, as that's what Friends did for a lot of their secondary and tertiary characters. They were, in a lot of cases, used to further develop the 6 protagonists, as well as strengthen or even question their tight bond.
You know, boyfriends and girlfriends are gonna come and go, but this is for life.
In other words, characters were not only used to create narrative tension for the protagonists that they're related to, but also act as a narrative crux to either create friction between the core characters or bring them closer.
Come on, do it, yeah, come on!
Another main character whose identity is shaped by their fractured parental relationship is Chandler. When he was a child, his parents divorced and announced it to him during Thanksgiving.
More turkey, Mr. Chandler.
Both his father and his mother seem to be very promiscuous, with his mother being an erotic writer and his father having multiple affairs. This only seems to deepen the resentment for Chandler.
I just get this craving for Kung Pao chicken.
That's too much information!
For him, not only have they split up, causing deep feelings of inadequacy and resentment, but their overtly sexual actions are a constant reminder of those feelings.
It just seems as though that maybe you have intimacy issues, you know, that you use your humor as a way of keeping people at a distance.
Yes, back then I used humor as a defense mechanism. Thank God I don't do that anymore.
Parents divorced before you hit puberty.
How did you know that?
It's textbook.
So it makes sense as to why Chandler would resent the traditional Thanksgiving holiday, as it's just another reminder of his trauma. You see this in the season 1 episode, the one where Underdog gets away. That Chandler has fully rejected the holiday and is content to spend it by himself if needed. It can also be seen in the one with all the Thanksgivings, where we see flashbacks to prior holidays. And Chandler spends his time at Monica and Ross's family home. It's clear that Chandler felt like he had no home to go back to, and needed Ross, and later the rest of the friend group, to help him reconnect with this holiday. Going back to the Thanksgiving episode in season 1, at the end of the episode, everyone misses their chance to be with their family for one reason or another, which results in the gang enjoying Chandler's soup, Funyuns, and grilled cheese sandwiches. This scene is an early example of how this group of friends were as close as a family. It's a really wholesome scene that just allows the audience to be with them, enjoying each other's company and forgetting their troubles. It's a real wholesomeness that truly resonated with its audience. And this show is full of moments such as this, which taps into the same homely feelings that classic family sitcoms provided, but it's updated for the 1990s. We've seen this with Phoebe and Chandler, but you also get a sense of this from the others. Take for instance Joey's parents. They have a strained relationship as his dad regularly goes away on business to cheat on his wife.
Can I just stop you right there for a second? When people do this, I don't really know what that means.
Additionally, Joey is one of 8 children, having 7 sisters, which could be his reason for preferring to be with the group over his family, as there's too many people in one space to find a real connection, and get all the love that he needs from his parents, as he shares them with too many siblings. Then you have the country club elites, with the likes of Monica, Ross and Rachel's parents. While Monica and Ross's father seems genuinely caring, albeit a little bit unrelatable.
You gotta get at it, princess. When your mother and I were trying to conceive you, whenever she was ovulating, bam, we did it. That's how I got my bad hip.
Their mother was a constant reminder to them, especially Monica, that they weren't good enough. She clearly favours Ross over Monica, and always assumes the worst of her daughter. The main instances of this are when Monica's mum hires her to cater for one of her events, and cooks a selection of food herself, assuming that Monica will get it wrong. And later, using Monica's marriage fund to buy their new beach house, assuming she will never get married.
What happened? You still have the Monica wedding fund, don't you?
We have it. Only now we call it the beach house.
This has caused a clear neurosis with Monica, who feels the need to control certain situations, keep everything tidy, and suffer from major body dysmorphia. On the opposite end, Ross was always told how good he was, and how smart he was. He was pampered by his parents, who made him unprepared for adulthood. A lot of situations Ross finds himself in are because of his lack of social awareness and his constant need to be right. Which always causes him to fall flat on his face. I think his season 5 mental decline can be chalked up to the fact that he wasn't prepared for situations like this. He felt he had to make his marriage work because he did not want to be defined by his divorces, which led him to pushing his friends away and continue to make a series of bad decisions.
You have no idea what it takes to make a marriage work. It's about compromise. Do you always like it? No. Do you do it? Yes.
The Geller siblings' constant bickering and need to be right stems from their relationships with their parents. Lastly, and I think the most overtly bad parent has to be Rachel's dad. When we meet Rachel in the first episode, she has just run out of her wedding to Barry, and over the course of the first couple of seasons, we are given glimpses into a relationship, in which we quickly find out that it was a loveless and a soulless one. But what becomes even more evident is that Rachel's dad has a stronghold on her life. In the first scene with him, Rachel is pleading not to go back home, but he threatens to cut her off financially if she doesn't.
Well, maybe I don't need your money. Wait, I said maybe.
And when we meet him in person, he's cold and judgmental. He has created for himself a strong power dynamic with the rest of his family, with almost a sense of ownership over his wife and daughters. It's a relationship built on him treating everyone around him as inferior. And this treatment comes full circle in the one with the lesbian wedding, where Rachel's mum tells her that she is divorcing her dad.
Why on earth would I understand this? You didn't marry your Barry, honey, but I married mine.
Rachel's mum saw that her daughter was able to escape a loveless marriage before it was too late. Thus, it's allowed her to do the same. Rachel escaping from her marriage to Barry and pulling away from the clutches of her father act as the catalyst for the show. You could argue that Friends is actually Rachel's story, as the inciting incident is her choosing to become financially independent. Throughout the series, you see her learn how to look after herself and flourish in her new career. The show even ends on her choosing to stay with Ross in New York over taking the job in Paris.
I got off the plane.
The show bookends on Rachel making 2 of the most important decisions in her life. This theory is further explored in the Takes video, Rachel Green, the real protagonist of Friends. And while I see the points made in this, I think there's clear narrative arcs for all 6 characters throughout. And what I find is true for all of them is that each character has issues that they must deal with throughout the series. And at some point or another, each character's parents act as an issue for them. The show is clearly turning its back on the traditional sitcom formula and pushing forward with a new type of family, and one that's been prevalent in sitcoms ever since. As discussed earlier with Seinfeld, comedy was evolving. Shows like Seinfeld and The Simpsons were dominating TV screens in the early 1990s with their irreverent and cynical senses of humour. What these shows did was focus on the flaws of these characters. And yes, there's numerous examples of Friends finding humour in the flaws of their main characters, but they also paired it with the more slapstick humour that preceded it.
Top of the world looking down on creation and
When you watch Friends, you're able to laugh with them, but you're also able to laugh at them. Each character ends up in stupid situations multiple times throughout the series. But by the end of the episode or the season, the friends are able to come together, make fun of one another, and laugh it off. They're able to grow and learn from their mistakes, and are oftentimes reminded of them by someone else in the group. This lets the audience in to be part of the gang. We can laugh and reminisce about the past mistakes, all the while laughing at them for making more silly choices. Not much is funnier than Ross, covered in talcum powder, clutching his pants, than the jokes you know are going to be thrown his way by the rest of the gang.
Look at me!
I think what was able to set Friends apart was how it was able to couple its humour with real social talking points. We see this from the very first episode, as Ross has recently divorced from his wife Carol, who is now happily living with her new partner Susan. We see Carol and Susan grow as a couple to the point that they get married in the second season, which is widely recognised as the first lesbian wedding on mainstream TV. Yes, a lot of the jokes surrounding these characters have aged badly.
There's Father's Day, there's Mother's Day, there's no Lesbian Lover Day.
Every day is Lesbian Lover Day!
But it was groundbreaking for audiences to see on screens at the time of airing. I also think for younger audiences, it could have helped normalise same-sex marriage. But it's not just Carol and Susan though. There's so many discussions surrounding queerness throughout the series. For instance, in the episode, the one where Nana dies twice, Chandler is set up on a date by his co-worker, believing he is gay. And when Chandler and the gang talk about it, they say he has a quality.
You have a quality.
Yes, right?
Equality, good, because I was worried you guys were going to be vague about this.
This topic is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to queerness in Friends, which makes sense as the writer and co-director, David Crane, is gay. It makes sense that he would pull from his own experiences and interpretations to craft the show. A video that is more in-depth and more nuanced on this topic is The Straightening of Chandler Bing by Matt Baum, which I'd highly recommend. It's not only LGBT representation that is furthered by Friends. The depiction of female sexuality is more prevalent throughout Friends than shows that have come before it. All of the friends seem like real people with real needs.
Now we need the semen of a righteous man.
Okay, Phoebes, you know what? If we had that, we wouldn't be doing the ritual in the first place.
It would have been so easy for the writers to revolve the sexual antics around Ross, Chandler and Joey, as this trope had already become the norm with the likes of Sam Malone in Cheers played by Ted Danson, who would often chat up bar patrons and fellow bar staff, constantly keeping his character revolving around sex. And while the men in Friends also do this...
What are you massaging an old man for?
His daughter was hot.
Gotcha.
The women are also shown to be as provocative as the men. They're shown as equals. They're real adults with real needs, not just objects for the male characters to ogle over. So many of these stories revolve around each character trying to find love. Every character has a number of love interests. Take for instance Monica. She's got Fun Bobby, Richard, and most notably Chandler. Rachel of course has Ross, but she's also got others such as Paolo and Joshua. And Phoebe had a number of suitors, such as David and Roger, before she married Mike. Every partner was able to bring something new out of these characters and helped shape their narratives throughout the series. It's not only their partners that help set these female characters apart from other shows at the time, but how open they are about their sexual proclivities. The characters are open about their sexual experiences. They discuss who they find attractive and talk about what they want from a man in bed. Take for instance the now iconic erogenous zones scene, where Monica and Rachel explain to Chandler how he can improve his sexual performance.
There are 7.
Let me see that. Oh, yeah.
It's an amazingly performed scene by Courtney Cox, which is memed and often discussed, still to this day. The scene also acts as the easiest example to show the viewer that big part of Friends was about sexuality when it came to women. They were able to have their sexual needs addressed and discussed. It's a sexual liberation for the female characters that wasn't often present in TV up until this point. And I think what this scene, and others like it, are able to show is that Rachel, Monica and Phoebe feel a sense of safety around the others, as they can freely discuss these topics without ridicule or objectification. By proxy, this shows the audience that these topics aren't taboo, and women don't need to be labelled for sleeping with anyone. The show's main characters shared a pseudo-familial bond, which allowed them to be open with one another without judgment. They were almost always a team, and that camaraderie created a warmth and safety that resonated with the viewer. While questionable at points, the first few seasons of Friends offered a number of opportunities to further the representation of the queer community and show a more nuanced representation of women's sexual experiences. But as seasons went on, it stagnated when it came to these, and even at times depicted negative representations of marginalised groups. I think the most obvious example of this has to be the representation of Helena Bing. Throughout the early seasons, it was discussed that Chandler's father had an affair with a houseboy, leading to the couple's divorce. We later learn in season 4 that she is a drag and cabaret act in Las Vegas.
Viva Las Vegas!
Unfortunately, that is correct.
But it's not until we meet this character that we realise they aren't just gay or bisexual, but clearly trans. Helena is always depicted as female presenting, wearing revealing dresses, and she's full of innuendos.
I'm not very fond of New York. Queens, I liked.
When we meet her, we see her drag show, and this becomes a key part of her presentation, with the characters still referring to her as a man and calling her Charles. Kathleen Turner, who plays Helena, stated that the creators pitched the character to her as
a woman playing a man playing a woman.
But there's contradictions to this numerous times throughout the series, as you see Helena dressed in femme-presenting outfits at all times, suggesting that it's more than just her occupation. This is her life. This is who she is. And what hurts even more to watch is how the characters act around her.
Oh, so pretty. I feel pretty and witty and...
She's the product of so many jokes, which may not necessarily be an issue, as Friends was able to navigate humour as a form of inclusivity when it came to queerness. But this goes beyond the jokes, as the characters seem to convey a sense of fear towards her. You have the constant misgendering by other characters, paired with the confusion surrounding her lifestyle, making for an uncomfortable watch. In recent years, co-creator Marta Kaufman has come out against their portrayal of Helena, stating,
"We kept referring to her as Chandler's father, even though Chandler's father was trans. Pronouns were not yet something that I understood, so we didn't refer to that character as she. That was a mistake."
I do believe that the creators were not intentionally being malicious with their portrayal of Helena, and I take Marta at her word, that she was ignorant to the nuances of trans representation. As Friends always, for good or for bad, tried to present a varied selection of people when it came to sexual identity. I do find it hard, however, to say the same about Friends when it comes to people of colour. All main characters are white. Hell, near enough all characters are white. Besides Julie, who featured throughout season 2, and Charlie, who appeared throughout seasons 9 and 10, there are no other recurring characters of colour. An article by BuzzFeed cites only 27 black characters throughout the entirety of the series, which doesn't feel representative of New York during the 90s and 2000s. One thing I feel I must mention is the show Living Single. It began in 1993 and followed the lives of 6 20-somethings that lived in New York. The show stars 6 black actors and is regarded as the inspiration for Friends.
When Living Single came out, Warren Littlefield, who was president of NBC, they asked him if he could have any show on television, any of the new shows, which one would it be? And he said Living Single. It was in the newspaper, and the next thing you know, here comes Friends.
It was 6
But
people
yeah.
sharing apartments.
Yep, in the city. Dating life and
Yeah.
life. And so, yeah.
You can clearly see the similarities between the two, with Friends feeling like more of an idyllic representation of life. For instance, the characters live in grand apartments, oftentimes only on one salary, all the while having enough money left over to buy dozens of coffees each month. It was also safe not to overtly discuss themes of financial troubles, other than the odd occasion, as it deviated from what the showrunners were trying to represent. A warm, wholesome environment where the viewer can feel like one of the gang. You connect with these people through themes of newfound family and relationships, and this is what's at the heart of the show's longevity. A mixture of all these aspects discussed today are why Friends was, and still is, so popular. Without the genuine connection felt through these 6 protagonists, you wouldn't have the hilarious moments. You wouldn't have the unforgettable phrases like, "How you doing?" and
"We were on a break!"
just to name a couple. You certainly wouldn't have shows such as The Big Bang Theory and the US version of The Office, both of which took the Ross and Rachel will they won't they storyline and recontextualized it. When I started this video out, I thought what made Friends stand out was that it bridged the gap between generations. It was at the right place at the right time, as it reworked it to be about friendships and the complexities that came from these relationships, all the while pairing it with a more sharp and edgier comedy style.
Oh, remember the days when you used to go out to the barn, lift up your shirt, and bend over? Yeah.
And while the show does do this masterfully, I failed to think about how the show made people feel. If the show hadn't resonated with people to the extent it had, it wouldn't be so memorable. it wouldn't be so funny. And despite all its flaws, it definitely wouldn't be as loved.
Look what you're doing to Chandler!
Friends is special to a lot of people, and it's only building its audience of new generations through not only streaming and Netflix, but through fashion, hair, and pop culture as a whole. It's heartbreaking to watch the show now after the tragic passing of Matthew Perry in 2023. But what I think makes it even more heartbreaking is seeing how much Matthew meant to his castmates. These 6 actors shared a special connection. They had a genuine love for one another.
How do you think the last episode of Friends would be for you?
I don't know, it'd be kind of sad. We've all grown so close over the years, you know, it's not something I'm looking forward to.
That was my family. I mean, we went through everything. Those 10 years were everything.
And it's because of this connection and their unforgettable performances that people will never forget these characters. I always remember feeling a sense of sadness when finishing the series. These actors were moving on, just like the characters were moving on, and the only thing that could fill this void for me was watching more Friends. Just like the lyrics from the theme, this show is there for audiences when they need comfort. It's there for them when they need friendship, and it's there when they need laughter, and that's what makes Friends different. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. See ya!